Okay, so the time is 6:30, so we'll call the meeting to order. First order of business is disclosure of pecuniary interest. So if any member of council has a pecuniary interest, I would ask that you make those disclosures to the clerk in writing. More people coming in, there's some seats there at the back. All right, well, thank you all for coming out to the special council meeting tonight. As many of you will know, after council received the contract leasing proposal from the OPP, we determined that it would be wise to engage the services of an independent contractor in the form of a consultant to do some analysis and study work regarding the proposal that we received from the OPP. So over the last couple of months, the consultant has engaged in that work, and the purpose of tonight's meeting is to receive his report in that regard. And I think it's important to point out that neither staff nor members of council has received an advanced copy of this report. So we've actually just received it on our desks there now. So everybody in this room tonight will be hearing and seeing the same information for the first time. After the presentation of the report, there will be an opportunity for members of council and staff to ask any questions that they may have of the consultant. This is not a public question and answer period tonight, so we will not be taking questions from the floor. And before we turn things over to the consultant, our CAO, Denise Morrissey, is going to provide just a brief overview of the process, as well as the timeline of the process the council has followed from the date of the initial motion until tonight, and then she'll also set out what the process is going forward. I think she's also going to provide a bit of an introduction to our consultant and his firm. So with that, I will welcome our CAO, Denise Morrissey, to the mic.
Thanks, Mayor Mills. This is not new information for most people, but we just want to make sure that we overview the chronology for you. This information is also on our website, and it's been on a number of our social media sites. So just to recap, when this process began was in November of 2017 on the 27th, when council directed that costing be requested from the OPP, and that was approved on the 4th of December 2017. The OPP were originally scheduled to present on July 16, 2018, and it was decided by council that should be deferred until the new year when a new council was in place. And that presentation from the OPP was received on January 14, 2019. The mayor has also alluded to the process whereby council determined that it would be beneficial to hire a third-party independent consultant to do the evaluation, comparing the OPP's costing presentation with the Shelburne Police Services, and that is the reason why we're here tonight. So the consultant, who is John Hamadides with Pomax, was hired on the 5th of March, and the OPP also presented their billing model to council on March the 25th. And obviously, this should clarify that there was a difference between the OPP costing presentation that we received and the billing model. And the billing model is based on a process where their costs are held on a contract basis for 3 years in transition. And after that, your costing is adjusted, and the consultant will overview those pricing schedules. From the period of March 27th to approximately May 31st, which was just a few days ago, the town ran an online survey asking for general input on community service policing, as well as some initiative questions regarding capital costs and taxation. We had a community information with the OPP on the 3rd of April, where the public was invited as well as council to ask questions with the OPP. Similarly, on the 13th of March, the Shelburne Police Services presented their annual 2018 report and also took questions and comments from the public. That brings us to tonight, which is the 3rd of June, and the presentation of the consultant's report. Council had also asked on April the 8th that staff go back and complete a summary of what was the prior initiative on an accommodation review, which was a committee that was working with the Police Services Board at the time. That report from staff, as well as looking at what an expansion of the existing facility would look like for a budget up to $3 million. And as I've clarified before, staff's understanding from that direction is that it's $3 million borrowed plus our applicable development charges. So that report again will be on the 10th of June. On the 24th of June will be staff's report, which will basically be a summary and culmination of all of this process with a series of recommendations. The report or the decision of the town of Shelburne's council must be given to the OPP by the 15th of July. So people have asked what happens on the 24th of June. There are probably three options that council could consider. They could make a decision that night. We would expect not. They would then defer that decision to the next applicable meeting, which is July the 8th. Or alternatively, they could call a special meeting at any time between that and the 15th of July. And just to clarify that we say special meeting, that is a constituted meeting that is officially declared by the mayor, and it's consistent with our procedural bylaw. And all meetings, as people know, are at 6:30, and sometimes the location changes as it is tonight. So I'd like to now introduce John Hamadides with Pomax. There were a number of companies that bid and remitted to our request for proposal for this analysis. So Pomax is a Canadian emergency services consultancy that has conducted emergency services reviews and studies across North America for the past 22 years. The firm is made up of a multidisciplinary team of 12 consultants as well as support staff with experience that spans from working on the front lines as emergency service responders to senior management roles of public safety organizations and major consulting firms, the executive positions in government-operated emergency services organizations as well. Pomax is a specialist in providing independent consulting expertise only, which allows the company to offer government organizations in particular, emergency responders, and the public impartial advice and assistance to determine the best fit with respect to long-range operational planning, response configurations, staffing levels, and deployment models, administration as well as governance, and the associated financial impacts specific to clients' needs and circumstances. Pomax has recently completed Ontario policing costing analysis for the town of Midland. They recently completed similar analysis for the municipality of Meaford, as well as other police-related studies in locations such as Winnipeg, Halifax, London, Ontario, San Francisco, Naperville, Illinois, and this included government, operational, administrative, technical, as well as infrastructure costing. So without further information, I'd like to welcome John, and he'll be with us for at least an hour of presentation and possibly more, and then council will be asking questions. So thank you very much. All yours.
Can you folks hear me here?
No.
Good. Okay, so thank you. Can you hear me now? Yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. When you can't hear me, stick your hand up, let me know, please. I'm really talking to council, but I know how frustrating it is to come to a meeting and not being able to hear what's being said. So, this, of course, is the study and analysis report of policing options. Just as an introduction, I'll get myself situated here. Just as an introduction, what we did as we worked along is we examined 3 years of the police services data from both the computer-aided dispatch and the record management system. We also took a look at, we examined 3 years of uniform crime reporting survey statistics. We accessed the crime severity index for Shelburne and other communities. calculated 10 years of billing model and calls for service costs. I don't think anybody's done that before in one of these scenarios. And we conducted 7 costing analysis models comparing Shelburne Police Services and Ontario Provincial Police costs. We think we've covered everything. We can't think of one more thing to do. I'll tell you more as we go along. As I get into this, I'm going to tell you the outcome early, and then I'm going to explain it, so that you don't have to wait for the outcome. Okay, the other things we did, I'll run through these quickly because you can read them as well as I can talk about them. We reviewed all the applicable legislation because some of this is concerning who can provide the best service, or is our services comparable. We assessed operational provision of services for both the Shelburne Police Services as well as are you standing up because you can't hear me? No? Okay. As well as the OPP. We conducted a survey of 21 municipalities which use OPP for policing. 7 of them responded. I'll tell you about that. And we examined governance and organizational structures of the municipal and provincial police services under Section 10 and Section 5.1. And if you want to understand Section 10 and Section 5.1, it's easy. Forget about 5.1. It doesn't apply to almost anything that you'll be dealing with. It has a tendency to confuse people. I want to talk a bit more about what Denise said. I want to make it really clear. Our approach to projects is all the same. We learned hard lessons on this over the last 22 years. Personal opinion does not play a part in our assessment. In fact, it doesn't matter to us the decisions that municipalities and clients make. We give them the best advice possible. It's then up to them to make a decision. We're not influenced by personal agendas, no matter whose it is. We're just not influenced by it. And in fact, we've had the situations where we've had to leave 1 or 2 projects because there was too much personal influence. And we just don't abide that type of thing. We disregard comments and personal positions and remain committed to objective assessment supported by evidence. So if you can't support it, opinion just doesn't count with us. So here's the conclusion. Come to the conclusion that evidence indicates that the same quality and level of policing service currently experienced by the town will continue if the town decides to contract with the OPP, but at a much lower cost. And our recommendation is that the town of Shelburne contracts for police services with the Ontario Provincial Police. So let us tell you why. As a background, the study was precipitated in part by a request from the police services to renovate or get a new building. The former Police Services Board contracted with a company by the name of Walter Fetty, architecture and construction engineering firm, to conduct a facility needs analysis, and they arrived at 3 options: renovate, adapt a building that exists, or build new. And those estimates range from $2 million to $4.1 million, and you've heard the updates on the amounts since that time. There's a lot of stuff in here, and you can read it. We looked at population and dwelling change, transitional cost proposals, calls for service, capital expenses, both on the side of the Shelburne Police Service as well as the OPP, amortization schedules of loans of $3 million and $7 million, operational costs for the Shelburne Police Services for each year of the 10-year period using 3 staffing scenarios. We looked at revenue expectations, asset disposal, severance and pension protection costs for Shelburne Police Services. We included adjustments to account for the most recent OPP arbitration awards. So we took those into account. Salary increases for Shelburne Police. We did a survey of municipalities. I'll tell you what the results are on those. And we took into account the comments and the concerns expressed by the residents through media. We've read the media reports. We've kept in touch with the online survey. and we listened at public meetings. And even though they wouldn't identify me at the public meetings, I was there. So there's some options. We looked at 7 options. And I'll tell you the reason we looked at 7 options. We, first of all, said, what's the cost of the OPP versus operating the Shelburne Police Service just at today's cost? So what this means is, in scenario A, we took a look at the Shelburne Police Service with their complement remaining at 2019 levels, today's levels, for the next 10 years, no staff enhancement costs, no renovation to police facilities. We know the probability of that is very low, but we examined that. That would be the lowest possible cost that Shelburne could operate as police service other than reducing staff. Okay, so today's model. Against each one of these, what we did was we assessed the OPP, but with continued growing costs. So we put the OPP in the worst financial position, and the Shelburne Police Service in the best financial position. Okay, sorry. So, 7 scenarios, that was the first one. We then took a look in scenario, which one is it? That one? B1. To increase the complement as requested by the chief, but only about $150,000 for renovation of the police facility. Not 3 million? Pretty good. Not 3, no, still too much for you. So, not 3 million or 7 million, but 150,000. That would only take care of the most critical needs. It's a moderate probability, but also unlikely. B2 are the complement increases as requested by the chief over the next 10 years, staffing increases, an inspector, sergeants, additional constables, plus $3 million for renovation for a facility. And as Denise told you, it's more than $3 million because that's the borrowing amount. We thought that's the most probable alternative. Now, you can read the rest of these. This one's the same as B2, except it's a $7 million capital expense. C1 to C3 are the same as B1 to B3, except we took the inspector out of the mix. We said, what happens if we just take the inspector out? Does that make the cost comparable? It doesn't. So I have to switch over for a minute so I can show you this. Okay, so I'm going to have to yell from here because I have to move this around. This is the scenario summary outcome. These are the 7 scenarios we assessed. Okay, the first one is the one that says there's no complement increase. The numbers of police officers remaining the same for the next 10 years. And there's no money for a building. It's highly unlikely, but we wanted to assess that one. So we assessed that against the Ontario Provincial Police and their costs, including their recent 2.15% salary increase. And we assessed those increases throughout the 10-year period. So this is the one where it said the best case scenario in costing for Shelburne Police against the worst case scenario for costing for the OPP. If you follow this along, in 2020, should council make this decision, then there's a net loss of $2.6 million, and that's because there's a very large payout at the beginning for owner's protection and for severance pay to the local police service. It even goes up in 2021. It's a little bit more costly. And then as you see, it starts dropping. And this is the cumulative gain or loss over the period of the 10 years. By 2025, all these costs are recovered. So in other words, during this period, starting in 2023, the cost of the OPP is sufficiently lower that it starts reducing the loss back here, if you want to call it that. And by 2025, all those costs are recovered. And that's the 5-year recovery. Sorry, we have to change this game because I have to move that. So these are the large figures. If you look at the very last column, right here, you'll see that under the best costing scenario for the Shelburne Police Service and the worst costing scenario for the OPP, at the end of 2029, the town will have saved over $4 million in policing costs. Now, unfortunately, you can't read the rest of this over here. D1 was $150,000 allocated for the renovations, but the police service received the enhancements, the complement enhancements, and they ended up moving forward on that basis. If that's the case, the town would save $8 million, $8.3 million over 10 years. B2 is the most likely scenario, if you recall me saying that. That's the one where the police get their enhancements. There's $3.some million for renovations to the existing facility. And in that case, if the OPP was the police providing service to the town, the savings to the town would be over $10 million by 2029. That, probably $1 million a year. These others down here are this is the $7 million one, so there's all the enhancements for the Shelburne Police Service, plus $7 million for the renovations or a new building. The savings in that case, should the OPP be the service providing policing, would be over $12.5 million savings in 10 years. These three, I won't go into them. These are the same scenarios, but we took the inspector out of the mix, one of the enhancements, took the inspector out of the mix. And as you can see, the savings would be $6.5 million, over $8 million, and almost $10.9 million over 10 years. So, excuse me, that's pretty substantial. So what does this mean to property owners? Well, this is what happens with property owners. These are the average savings per property, depending on the scenario. At the best case scenario, the savings would be $939 to each property owner on average over a period of 10 years. As you can see, there's the B2 scenario, which is the most, the one that's more, would probably be the chosen scenario if the Shelburne Police Service continued to provide service, and the savings would be $2,500 over 10 years if the OPP provided policing rather than the Shelburne Police Service. You can read the rest of the again, this is per property cost. So, is one service better than the other? And within legislation in Ontario, there's service standards. And the service standards in the legislation gives municipalities responsibility for providing police service. It gives the Ministry of the Solicitor General the responsibility for interpreting the Act and regulations, as well as inspecting the activities of the Ontario Police Services. It identifies core activities for policing in Ontario and describes 6 principles for police services to follow in carrying out those activities. This applies to every police force in Ontario, including the OPP and the Shelburne Police Services. Core activities for police services in Ontario include preventing crime, enforcing laws, helping victims, keeping public order, and responding to emergencies. They're also committed by legislation to 6 principles, and you can see what they are here. You know, safeguarding fundamental rights, working closely with communities, ensuring the police services are representative of the communities they serve. So, I'm going to be talking more about this, but the point is that from the point of view, is one police service better in providing service than the other? It's very hard to say that one is or isn't. They all follow the same standards. In many cases, when there's been a change in police service from the local police service to the OPP, it's still the local police, the people who live in your community, that continue to provide the service. So it's very difficult to say one's better than the other, but there are a couple of other things. There's community questions and concerns. And some of the things that the community members are concerned about is how quickly will a police officer arrive, the number of police officers in town at any time, guarantees of police officers, will the board have any authority, and so on. And community members are also concerned about things like school visits, community service, zone deployment response, local knowledge, response to incidents, and so on. Nevertheless, no matter how you look at all those things, it's very difficult to try and find something objective which says that one police service does a better job than another police service. There's always times in every incident where people look for something better, but it's hard to find objective evidence of that. And what we've come to the conclusion of is that the evidence indicates that the same quality and level of policing service currently experienced by the town will continue if the town decides to contract with the OPP, but at a much lower cost. Before we get back to this, I want to show you a few other things that I think are important. I'm going to have to switch back and forth for a few minutes. It's concerning the work we did in the municipal survey and so on, so hold on for a moment for that. We did a municipal survey. We got about a 30% response. And we told the municipalities that we wouldn't indicate who they were, although everything they said was good. The town, they worked closely with our fire department. I've got to roll this up, sorry. OPP headquarters in Allison, which may help with that. They also provide strong statistics to inform the town of the calls that have been made and the trending of issues. One municipality, which you know about probably, which has switched away from the OPP, and that was because of cost. And we actually talked to the CAO and said, were you dissatisfied with the service? They felt the service was good. They couldn't get a guarantee from the OPP that there would always be an officer in town, and so they moved to another service. On top of that, they saved some money. So that was a good move for them, and some of those situations happen across Ontario. My original intent was to go into a fair amount of detail about the work we did and the financial assessment we did, run through the 7 scenarios and accommodate that detail and get right into it. It's very difficult to do when you're moving back and forth because I actually have to be sitting in front of the computer to accomplish that. If there's a real desire for it, I'll start doing that. Otherwise, yes?
I have a question. So who was survey done? Which one of these municipalities?
Are we taking questions? No. So, okay, let me switch back. So let me talk a little bit about school visits, community service, zone deployment, the local knowledge, those sort of things. We know that that's a concern among members of the community. So in 2018, the Shelburne Police Service spent 151 hours on school visits and for patrol, according to the data that we have. That's about 45 minutes per day for the school days, almost 200 school days per year in the schools. The OPP also have an officer assigned to community service, which includes school visits. That's in keeping with most other police forces across Ontario. For everything we can assess between those two services, we feel that the frequency of visits will be about the same. On the other hand, if the Police Services Board doesn't feel that it's satisfactory, then they can talk to the staff sergeant and have changes made in that visitation. Some of the local knowledge we talked about a moment ago, local knowledge really continues with the police officers that have been on Shelburne Police Service, if that decision is made, since those police officers would continue to work within the community. It's very unusual for everybody who lives in the community, works around the community, all of a sudden to leave and head off for another community. So I think that's something that there's very, very little concern that will actually happen. I wanted to talk about zone deployment and response. The difficulty with zone deployment is that I think it's a misnomer. Since the early 1970s, the province of Ontario has employed zone response for paramedic services, except they call it borderless response. It's much more positive. And what that means is that the closest ambulance goes to the incident and the most appropriate ambulance. The zone situation that the OPP deploy is similar. Normally, the officers are assigned to their location, and only under unusual circumstances will they leave and respond to another area. So the zone simply means that there's an assignment area and officers stay within that assignment area for most circumstances. The role of the Police Services Board, I think it's worth putting this one up. I'm sorry about moving back back and forth. This isn't the most conducive for providing a presentation. So maintaining local control is a very important part of deciding whether to make a decision to move to the OPP. Under a Section 10 contract, a police services board is mandatory. About the only difference you see in a police services board that's under Section 10 contract with the OPP and a local board is that they can become involved in hiring, but they do not have a final decision in hiring, either the detachment commander or the officers. They also don't get involved in strategic planning for the police force because, of course, that's done on a provincial basis. And if you want to look it up, you should read the OPP strategic plan along with the Shelburne Police Service strategic plan. They're both very enlightening. All hiring costs are covered under the agreement with the OPP, so the Police Services Board doesn't incur any hiring costs. They don't get to appoint members of the force. Sorry, I have to move again. The Police Services Board does have a strong say in the standard of policing that occurs in the community, either working directly with the staff sergeant or the detachment commander to come up with the right number of officers, ride programs, enforcement programs, traffic enforcement, and enhancements. For example, some locations, some municipalities have an enhancement in the number of officers, and they find that the revenue that they get out of that enhancement covers the officer plus puts more revenue into the municipality. And the Police Services Board also has a hand in level of service costs by working with the detachment commander on negotiating costs and schedules and appending those to agreements. So, there's a lot more I wanted to show you. Unfortunately, because of the methodology here and having to use a computer, I can't do that. I think I'm going to stop. I want to go over the conclusion. I want to go over the recommendation. I'm going to stop and take questions and perhaps we get into a lot more detail that way. So, bear with me again. Okay, so my apologies, but nevertheless. So our conclusions. All the evidence indicates that you can get the same quality and level of policing services currently experienced by the town, and those will continue if the town decides to contract with the OPP. The cost will be much lower. Depending on the scenario that is assessed against, anywhere from $4 million to $12 million over a 10-year period, savings to the town, and between $930 and over $3,000 savings over a 10-year period per property owner. Our recommendation would be the town of Shelburne contracts for police services with the Ontario Provincial Police. At that point, I'm going to leave the rest and take questions from council.
Mine's more of a comment than a question. I guess My biggest concern tonight is the fact that we just received this. We haven't had a chance to read through it in detail and get a handle on things to be in a position to ask any questions. So I'm certainly not going to want to defer. I'd like to defer this to the future in terms of what we do, because there's no way we can ask questions.
Okay.
So I have a question. It may be somewhat unfair for you to ask.
Can't hear us.
I think my voice carries, no? No? Not loud enough? Come on, guys. All right. So I'll try to speak louder. My question is, in the recent news, there has been comments about significant cuts to the OPP and potentially the OPP budget. And some people are wondering, probably some people here as well, as to whether or not that will have an impact on, if we were to go with the OPP, would that have an impact on service provided to the town? And would that impact potentially the rates that the OPP would be charging?
Okay, so first of all, nobody can really answer that question because we don't know what's going to happen over a period of years any more than we know what's going to happen if the government decides to cut some grants to municipalities and it affects your police service. So, you know, it's a balancing act on that one. From our understanding and talking to the OPP, this is not about, the cuts are not about frontline service. The cuts are supposed to affect people at the headquarters level, detachment level, and up. And that's where the savings is supposed to come from. If you read the auditor's report from 2012 about the OPP, they said a number of things. One of the things that they indicated was that the OPP had lots of staff. They're just not used efficiently in many cases. So in other words, they have staff on during times when perhaps they don't have to have as many staff on. And they don't allocate that and perhaps utilize some of the techniques that other police services use on a regional basis and across Canada to find reductions in costs. So I would imagine that that's the type of thing that's going to start happening. And if you look at their strategic plan, one of the things that they have in the strategic plan as a strategic initiative is to use data to inform what's going on in their service areas, province-wide and so on. So from that point of view, will it affect? Probably not. From the point of view of will costs increase, we took those into account as a matter of fact. When we calculated the OPP's costing over a 10-year period, we actually worked out 10 years of cost per service and the service-based costs, and we did that for 10 years instead of taking an average and increasing it by 1.25%, for example. Once we had done that, we then decided to increase the amount of money we came up with by 3.22% on an annual basis. So and to read that in the report, we describe how we did it. So that probably covers off any potential for an increase or the impact of increases over the 10-year period.
John, your conclusion is sort of twofold. One is that the level of service that the town enjoys now with Shelburne Police Service will not see any major impact in a move to OPP, but there will be an impact in terms of the financial aspect. In coming to that conclusion, did you assume that the town would be availing itself of any of the add-ons or enhancements to the OPP? Or are you making that conclusion based on the premise that we would just be receiving sort of the baseline service from OPP?
It's all baseline. And in fact, the scenario A, when you look at that, because that's the one that offers the best circumstance for the Shelburne Police Service from a monetary point of view, not from an operational, but from a monetary point of view, was done in that fashion to see what would happen if you then decided, if you made that decision to pay for enhancements with the OPP. So as an example, over the 10-year period, that $4.5 million, it indicates about 7.5 full-time equivalents in policing. So as in other townships, surrounding townships, for example, Mono, I believe, Mono actually is contracted for enhancement with the OPP for a .8 officer who does traffic enforcement. And they pay about $80,000 for that traffic enforcement and bring in about $130,000 from it. So the answer is we didn't take any of that into account. This is just a straight on, if you want to call it apples to apples, as best as possible. So $4 million is probably the least the community would save by moving to the OPP.
It looks like that's it. Is that working or not? There we go. So it looks like that's it in terms of questions. I think there's sort of a shared feeling amongst council members that it's kind of difficult to come up with many questions without having a chance to review the report in detail. So with that, John, as we sort of progress through the balance of this process, if we need to bring you back for another council meeting just to ask questions, you're okay with that? Yeah, okay. Great, all right. Last, any questions from staff?
Sorry, I should clarify when I was up there that as of tomorrow morning by probably 9:30, the report that we just received will be posted on our website. We'll provide the link to our Facebook and our social media. We just need time to get it and load it up. So just to clarify, I apologize for not making that clear earlier.
In case you didn't hear that, the full report that John has just provided to council will be available on our website tomorrow morning, probably by about 9:30. And there'll be links shared on social media. So if you're not on social media, just go to our website and find the link there. Last chance for questions before we move on. If not, okay, we have a motion that reads as follows. Be it resolved, the council receives a report from Pomax Inc. as presented. We have a mover and seconder for that. Moved by Councilor Donato, seconded by Councilor Anderson. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? That motion carries. And that brings us to the confirming bylaw. Be it resolved that leave be given for the reading and enacting of bylaw number 35-2019, being a bylaw to confirm certain proceedings of the Council of the Corporation of the Town of Shelburne for a special council meeting held June 3rd, 2019. The mover and seconder for that, Councilor Donato, seconded by Councilor Fegan. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. And finally, be it resolved that we now adjourn the meeting to call the mayor. Mover and seconder, moved by Councilor Buffett, seconded by Deputy Mayor Anderson. All in favor? Carried. Thank you, Rob. So next meeting will be next Monday night, 6:30 in the council chambers.
Before everybody goes, I wonder if I could ask a question. I'm the Shelburne Freelancer, and I'm just interested. I'm curious, could I have a show of hands, please, for how many people in this room took the online survey that was referenced this evening? Okay. And just because we have a collective group, how many people are in favor of the OPP? Show of hands. And how many people are in favor of the Shelburne Police Services? Show of hands. Oh, thank you very much, guys. And that'll be on my website.
Sorry, I have to correct Alex. The survey that the consultant referenced was the survey that he conducted. The survey that the community responded to has not yet been reported back. A full report will be provided on that information.
Thank you.